So welcome guys to Wemcast, another episode with Eoin Walker. I'm here today with a colleague and friend of Wem's, Julian Woodall. Welcome, Julian.
Hey, how's it going, Owen?
Good,
Great
thanks.
to be here.
Good man. So in this episode, Julian, I just wanted to get a little bit about your background and your perspectives on where you've come from, really, because you've got a nice, really varied background, and there's some real lessons we can learn from some of the stuff you've done, some of the stuff you've been up to, and it bears relevance on where we are today. So, Julian, do you just want to introduce yourself for the listeners as to where you come from?
Okay, so how I started off as a medic, it was by accident. I served in the army from 1990 till 2005, and in 2002, I went over to another unit on an operational tour, and we've always done first aid, always through our army career. I remember this one instructor. He was on a specialist course I was on, and he was a Southern Irish guy, and it was 2001 to the start 2002, and Afghan had only just kicked on, and in his Southern Irish accent, he used to go on about how much he loved trauma. And the rumour had it was he used to drive around the M25 on a weekend looking for car accidents to practice his trauma. Because before Afghanistan kicked off, there was absolutely nothing at all. So he used to do that. He was really right passionate about his trauma. So he taught us some first aid, and then it was in, I reckon, about May 2002. I was walking across our compound, and I had a broom in my hand, and our big staff sergeant who's in charge of training, he said, "Oi, how do you fancy going on a medics course?" I mean, okay. Never done anything or even thought about it. Went on a medics course, and it was only like a week's course, this one, because the army do have a habit of sticking you through some right crash courses, and I loved it. I was learning all these new skills and everything, and I found it interesting. And I think it was interesting because the instructors, how they actually put it over. So I took a lot away from that. So I started then applying for like other courses. One of the best courses I did was actually the MIRA course, the Medicine in Remote Areas course. And once again, fantastic instructors on that. I just absorbed all that info. And I got out of the army in 2005, and I set up a business called Medic Services International. So now I work as a health and safety training consultant and as remote areas medic. So I'm lucky. I've worked in some real good out of the way places, and I'm always loving adapting to new areas as well. I find it like I'll have a go at that, see what that is like. I'm a desert person. I do love it out in the desert. Back in 2018, a friend of mine who's once again a soldier, today we do fancy coming out and having a week in Norway of cross-country skiing. Never been to Norway. I've done a bit of cross-country skiing in Austria. What I did, I ran him through a level 3 outdoor first aid course, and I was in temperatures like minus 17 and stuff like that. And I wrote up a blog each day about it because I was it was cold, put it that way. So I find it a challenge actually adapting, and I find it more of a challenge if it's more of a remote area. I find it more of a challenge, and with obviously less kit as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Julian. Absolutely. So, so when you were in the military, what just doing a bit of a deep dive into your military experience. What area of the military were you in, and what were you deployed? Where were you deployed, and what
I
rank?
was artillery. I was a gunner, and I was a forward observer, and I did air defence as well. But a lot of us are cross-trained as well. So a course will come up, and they'll say, right, I need a medic. So I went on without going into actual detail, a specialist course. I passed it. So once you go away with that unit, you get other options to do in other courses as well. And that's where it started, obviously, to actually come from.
Yeah, indeed. And did you get a chance to put that teaching into practice? What in your military experience did you have moments or scenarios where you had to stem catastrophic hemorrhage or indeed look after colleagues in the field?
I can tell you the first time I dealt with a catastrophic injury, and it was July 1996 in Northern Ireland. And we'd done all the first aid, obviously, training and the build-up stuff. And it was, I can remember the time and everything, and it was 20 to 7 on a morning. And it was in the July, and I'd been deployed about 7 days. And we was in a thing called a sangha, it's like a bunker. So they have a downstairs and upstairs. We had a guy upstairs, a lad called Nick, and I was downstairs. And it was in Belfast, and we see this guy on the Antrim road, and we was in our little camp, our security force camp, and there was a lad running in front of the cars. Now, soldiers have a very dark sense of humour, and if you qualify as a medic, you have an even more dark sense of humour. So I said to the guy upstairs, Nick, I said, do us a favour. We've got a lad at the moment, he thinks he's a dog, he's actually chasing after the cars. I said, the colour pops through, and then I want you to, they'll get on to the time it is the RUC. Before, now it's the PSNI. So a couple of minutes later, he came walking down a road towards us, and he stopped. We used to have a piece of glass about that thick, armour-plated glass. And he stood and just looked at me, stared at me. And he pulled out a knife, and he started to slash across his arms and saying the words, I'm going to kill myself. So we got him in. We got him in to the camp. And I always remember he had a knife at he had blood all over his arms completely. He had a knife at his throat. And he said, don't kill me. I'm a Catholic kid. And he told the story. It's quite a sad story. And we must have gone through quite a few, obviously, bandages. And we called up to the medics and everything. And they obviously came over. And that's the first time I'd ever treated a catastrophic bleed. It wasn't a pleasant experience because it wasn't like, I've obviously treated other people who've been injured, and you can go and you can calm them down. But if it's someone who's committing or trying to commit suicide, it's quite bad. And he's also taken antidepressants as well, about 40 of them. So that was the actual first time I treated a catastrophic bleed.
Gosh. As you say, Julian, quite a difficult situation actually, because it sounds like it's multifactorial. Did you take any principles from that around treating catastrophic bleeds? As in, was there any sort of fundamentals that you now teach when you were that you saw at that time that just to stem the bleeding?
I teach now. I actually stick it in every single course I teach. And what I think is, I can't teach you how to act at an incident, because it was basically a shocking thing to me. And I never had any counselling for it. But and I must admit, I panicked. I saved his life, but I still obviously panicked about it, and I'm honest about it. But as I've grown older and more experienced, I've now come to the fact where I can handle situations in a much more calmer way. and I put that in. What the importance was actually telling him to stick his hand on his wrist.
So getting him to do the work, getting him to do some of the work for you, actually, whilst ever you get your bandages ready.
Yeah. And it was the old army bandages where it comes out like a butterfly. I don't know if you've actually seen that. We got taught in our course in 2002 to carry a crate bandage. So the thing was, if we got shot, you pulled, we used to call them like wings, you pulled the wings off, shoved them in the hole, put the field officer dressing on at top, and then put the crepe officer bandage around it. It's never caught, the Israelis caught on obviously to it and come out with some great obviously bandages, and they must have got it from, because I think now the stuff that we actually carried in our like med kits, even in 2002, oh my God, things have advanced. Like the tourniquet was like a rubber hose.
Yeah.
It was, it had like I remember metal round a circle and like a half on the actual top looked like an 8. So compared to the kit we've got now, it's
vastly different. Yeah, absolutely. So Julian, let's just move forward slightly. So you come out of the military in 2002. Where do you find yourself?
No, 2005.
Sorry, 2005. Where do you find yourself in 2005, and how do you transition to where you are now?
I worked as a medic on a couple of CP teams, but that was rather boring. And then I had all these qualifications, and I thought I need to do something which is going to benefit not only myself but people. So I went on a first aid instructor's course, and I learnt lots on that. Then from the first aid instructor's course, we're looking, someone that told us about a job with the Navy as a first aid instructor, as a civilian contractor. I had a meeting and an interview about it. So I worked for the Royal Navy from 2008 till 2012. That job that's where I learned a lot more stuff. And each step I've done courses, I've actually learnt more. Yeah. I must admit. Yeah. Now where it's brought me in 2020, a lot more experience, a lot more knowledgeable, and a lot more adaptable for each country that I actually go to. Yeah. And one thing I do is I learn about that country before I go in there.
Yeah. So at the moment, let's just define for listeners what you're doing, what primarily you're doing now. So what do you do now, Julian? What's the mainstay of your work?
Now I teach anything from, well, a lot of the people who I teach now are remote workers, like tree surgeons. Just got a contract with a wind farm. I've got a contract with a car company who's an engineering company, and they send their engineers into either extreme cold, extreme mossy desert areas to actually test their engines and that, and at high altitude. So I basically teach remote areas and first aid to a very high standard. So it's obviously people who haven't got any like medical care. That's basically not an hour away. We're looking at 2 hours, 3 hours a day, 2 days.
Yeah, gosh.
I taught a course out in Iraq at a refinery at Basra in 2017, and I said, "How long is it until the emergency services turn up?" And the guy said, 2 days, 3 days, 4 if we're sort of lucky. Wow. So they needed really in-depth thought of keeping the guys alive training.
So Iraq's not the only place you've been to, is it? I mean, I know you've been all over the Middle East and Africa. Where I also know you've done a lot in Ethiopia. So let's look at Ethiopia and a few other places. But
Yeah.
where's the remotest you've been? Albeit maybe it is Ethiopia. Where's the sort of furthest away from definitive care you've been?
Jordan. If something would have gone wrong in Jordan, I would not be here now. Now, a lot of the listeners are thinking, well, why would you go out without any care? And so I'm now going to explain about Jordan. So a friend of mine called Seb Coulthard, who is an Antarctic explorer, and he was on the Shackleton Epic expedition, and he's also ex-Navy, and that's how I met him. He came back from the Shackleton Epic expedition, and we was on doing our own expedition. And he said, "I fancy doing a desert thing," and I have an interest in Lawrence of Arabia. So we started to look at a desert expedition, and we started off first 6 weeks and everything. Now we did an attack on Aqaba, and Aqaba is a port in Jordan, and Lawrence went through the Nafu desert, Wadi Rumm, and then into Aqaba. We looked at our budget, so we decided to just go from Wadi Rumm to Aqaba to experience what he felt, but we didn't want to do it just any whim. The ideal time would have been in October. The weather's cooling down and everything like that. Water's easy to actually get to. In 2017, it was the 100th anniversary of him, Lawrence, going in to Aqaba with the Arab army. So our mission was to go from Wadi Rumm to Aqaba, follow the same route as he did on camel. We had myself, Seb, Auda, a Bedouin guide. We had 3 camels and a baggage camel.
Wow.
Or the actual baggage camel was called the Logistics Camel Alpha 1. And we spent 5 days going through that desert, and we saw no vehicles. We saw a couple of camels, we saw some snake obviously tracks. It was isolation. It was, if we'd have had to call in an emergency from a snake bite or something like that, it would have been basically end of exercise.
Gosh,
but the point is, we did exactly what the Lawrence did, apart from that attack. But we experienced extreme heats. We stuck out a thermometer and went off. It went up to 140. It went off the actual scales. We both had dehydration at some stage. You're lethargic. The sun's out. We wore traditional Arab gear, not to actually play it being a Lawrence, but we wore on the first day a shirt and pair of trousers as normal. Changing to Arab gear on the second day, and the difference having the headscarf on, the shamag, the jibala, it's much more cooler because on the camel all the air comes through. Well, I'm not joking, Owen. It was a great expedition, but we had all our med kit, and it wasn't a big med bag. It was like everything was all condensed. Right, I need this, I need that. It was proper remote areas medicine. Now, some of the listeners all think that's a bit stupid not having a support team and all that. Both of us are medics, as like remote areas medicine, I like medics, but also both of us know, and we did research on the area. We know not to go obviously playing with snakes. We saw snake tracks, and we were going up a jebel, a hill, a mountain, and I heard a And I said, mate, we should get off here now. I think we stood on a snake's house at the moment. And that's the remotest area I've been to. I think even over in Iraq and the oil, like the refinery, the Kuwaiti border was like 10 Aussie k's away, but we had all loads of equipment and all that sort of stuff. And this one day, we went to a well for the camels, and the well had actually dried up, and we had to find another well. And Elder, our guide, he said, there is no mai. And my mate went, mai? Because I speak a little Arabic. I said, he means water. There is no water for the camels. If the camels die, we die. Oh, that's a bit of a shit deal. Luckily, we had loads of food and water on our camels and stuff like that. But he just says, if the camels die, we die. Oh, okay. So that's the remotest part I've actually been to.
Gosh, Julian. So let's look at a few other places you've been to, because it's fascinating where your skills and training's taking you. So I know you spent quite a lot of time in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
I want to come back to some of the fundamentals that you've learned about remote medicine and just remote first aid in the remotest of places, and some of the things that you teach and that you. But let's just first look at Ethiopia. How did you come to being in Ethiopia, and what did that look like?
Old army mate of mine, he asked me if I've ever been to Africa, and I said only Nigeria. And he said, well, this job's in Ethiopia. It's a training job. It's 10 days a month or 12 days a month, going from September up until February of this year. So he lives in Germany. He's a security consultant, and he got me from LinkedIn because he'd seen all the stuff I was putting on about catastrophic bleed management and all that. So I flew out to Germany and had a meeting. I stopped at his, and he told me what it wasn't just I was in charge of all of the mission planning, how to teach it, catastrophic bleed management, communication skills, how to do the vehicle checks. So we developed the actual course around all of that. And what it was training nationals who work for an international development company. They work as drivers, and they go from the capital at Addis or another place, and they take internationals around. So it was teaching them the fundamental skills, and also, of obviously what happens if they get stopped by the bandits, the police, how to act at checkpoints. But the important thing was they have a sat phone, so they can call in an emergency. But we were teaching them catastrophic bleeds. So if they get a fracture in a road accident or a gunshot wound, that's going to be another thing, a gunshot wound. So we're teaching them up to a very high standard. And when we got there and we saw the kit that they've got, we had to work with that, because a lot of people say, well, hang on a minute, you need this and you need that. But if the client had a hemostatic agent, which I'm not going to say its name, I didn't think a lot of. I use Celox. They had a SAM TX tourniquet, and it's the first time I'd ever used it, because I normally use the cat tourniquet. But what you have to do is adapt different type of bandage. It wasn't an ECB, it was another bandage. But you have to improvise, adapt and overcome with what the actual client's got. But it was then more of a challenge, because I've not worked in Africa in years, and it was actually teaching Ethiopians. I've never been there. So I researched about the actual people, the history of the actual country, the health care and all of that. And it's quite, if they'd have got ambushed or anything, they're in a remote area as well. But they've also got to think of animals, things eating you and stuff like that. And it happens out there. So it was a really big project, but it was worthwhile. And the Ethiopians are lovely people, and it was a great thing. But from learning as a remote areas medic, as soon as I got off the aircraft, the altitude is something like 2,400 meters in the capital. I got off the aircraft, stood outside. I was like, I just had a shirt on. I was thinking, it's a bit cold here. I remember I went out and I had on a hoodie top. And there's also a picture of me out there where I've got like a fleece on and a woolen hat on at night time, because the temperature drops completely.
Just because
so it was a different teaching, a different way of teaching, but also how can we teach these people and get them adapted to their environment? And that's what's important. You've got improvise, adapt, and overcome. You've got to pass over skills to people who they don't speak English as a first language. I had to slow down completely, lots of hand-offs, gestures and stuff, because of my I got a Worcestershire accent. So I had to slow down. We had to cut things out of the training that was deemed obviously technical, and we had to put things in to the training which was lots of practical hands-on stuff, and get them to do it over and over again.
Yeah. Julian, when you were teaching the Ethiopians, were you teaching gunshot wounds? Was that one of the fundamental things you were teaching?
We were teaching fractures, gunshot wounds especially. What happens if a bullet hits all of the body and stuff like that. Sucking chest wounds, explaining that. We couldn't obviously take all my training equipment out there, so we had to improvise again. We bought out of a shop who were so happy for us. We bought 20 large sponges. We then cut holes in the top of the sponges, put some red Aussie like marker pen, and then we taught them wound packing using that. And it worked. It worked. You might not. I hear a lot of medics who've got a big pack and everything. I remember in Oman, I acted as medic and acted as a signaller. And we used to get issued like a pack about that big, and you zipped it open and you had all your stuff in there. And that's for everything. So I think because I've been taught to operate with less kit, if I get something like oxygen and stuff like that, you then sort of, this is a bonus. I've got oxygen this time. I've not got to use a bag and a valve and a mask. So it's always good to go back to basics, especially like in a remote area, because these people who go, they may take a 400 kilometre journey. They might have we say, if you get hit, you either go forward or back. You find the help. Where's the health officer centre? Where's the police station? The health centre might be another 100 kilometres. So they've got to keep the person alive for 100 kilometres. And they might not have medical drugs and stuff like that.
So that brings me nicely on, actually, Julian, to the next question about what you teach and have probably fundamentally learned about medicine in remote environments and remote areas. What are some of the not necessarily basics, but principles that you teach people around sort of keeping people alive in these situations?
You have to be adaptable and work with what you've got. I've been to companies in this country who they've not got a tourniquet, they've not got an Israeli bandage and stuff like that. They've not got Celox, they've not got a Fox, obviously chest seal. So you have to teach with what they've got. But you have to, it doesn't matter if you haven't got a cat or a Sam tourniquet, improvise, adapt, and overcome something. If you've got a wound that's got a hole in it and you need to actually pack it, use something out the first aid kit. You know, and that's what's important. Because also in a remote area, if you're in a road accident or you get ambushed or something, and in Africa it happens, and out in Iraq and all those obviously places, if you've got to do a runner, you've got to work with what you've got. So I teach them how to use the stuff up to a high standard. Then say, okay, let's now improvise, adapt, and overcome with what happens if you've run out of bandages. You got your t-shirt, you got your belts and that. The guys out in Ethiopia on doing splints, they were improvising with belts and scarves and everything, and we weren't even obviously teaching them, which was good because they might not have, you know, a triangular bandage and stuff like that. And you have to, it's proper remote medicine. It's,
Yeah.
I've got aspirin for that do, ibuprofen.
As far as the communication piece goes, Julian, when sort of improvise, adapt, and overcome is concerned, because you're right, it's ubiquitous amongst medical care and comms and situation awareness. With the communication piece, how were you teaching people to improvise, adapt, and overcome? Was it a multimodal approach, sort of a mobile phone, a VHF radio, maybe a sat phone, and just make sure you're not reliant on one mode alone, or was there a number of factors you were looking at?
It was all different things. I mean, it was Africa, so they said they actually might have to send a runner on a donkey or a horse, and I'm being serious. So we started off with we actually didn't use a methane like a report. We used the W's. Who they actually are, what has happened, where, when, and what you need. So that kept it simple for them. Okay. When we went on to communications, we told them about a mobile phone to the security risk manager's office. Okay, so they report in straight away. Even if they've been through a militia checkpoint, they drive out the way and report in. They might be an area that's got a communications officer, you know, like a black spot where there's no comms in or out. Another thing that we actually brought in was a thing called spot codes. So what a spot code is you go from point A to point G, but each road, obviously junction, or each like village, you report in. So if they gone to A to B, they're actually getting a message. B to obviously C, okay. Then if nothing happens from C to D, the SRM's office is going, oh, hang on a minute, or an ops room's going, hang on a minute, we've not heard. If they come in after E, oh, it's okay, it was a communications blackout. But if you still don't hear anything, that's what's important. So we also taught them how to use a sat phone as well. You know, as an emergency only. Now, some of the people were actually saying on the course, well, some of us haven't got a sat phone. I said, well, it's all been obviously brought in, but it's a new piece of equipment. And one of the guys did say, we were given a sat phone, we didn't know how it worked. So the importance was that if they had an accident there and then, to report in. If you've been from a gunshot wound in the vehicle and the vehicle obviously drove on, they have to report it out of sight, because we also taught them how to do an emergency report whilst they're driving, but also how to stick on the bandage and the tourniquet inside a vehicle as it's going, because if you've been ambushed, you can't stop. So we put a lot of emphasis on obviously calling in an emergency. And one of the things I said was, you need to work as a team actually doing this. One person is doing like all of the medical stuff. The other person, they're calling it in straight away.
So there's simultaneous activity, Julian. So you're advocating that simultaneous activity approach where every member, there's no redundancy within the team. So every member is doing a specific job.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It works. It works that way. It works. It's like we held exercises where there's also been an ambush and the bandits have obviously gone off. And another vehicle in the convoy is actually found them, to get one person up front looking around the actual corner as like a sentry, a lookout, in case the bandits come back. There was another one where, one person is actually doing a triage, taking notes. Another person is then obviously calling it in, the initial call, and then actually calling in all of the casualties, doing a triage, and then getting them over to actually a triage station, and then getting everybody back in. So it was using all our military skills, and they actually loved it, because they've been used to having all of the training in a classroom or films and talks and stuff like that, but having it now outside, and you're putting it in to practice. That is what's important.
Yeah,
you can go in the classroom all over and all that sort of stuff, and you can do it over and over again. But outside in a scenario, I feel it's only after years and years of obviously practice and doing it, then you can go, right, okay, I need to step back here, and stepping back, taking a couple of seconds and thinking, how am I going to do this? Another case as well is having a team leader and get the team leader to organise people, so he can then watch what other people are doing and saying, oh, have a think about us doing that.
That makes sense. That absolutely makes sense. And I advocate the same in training, Julian, absolutely. Having someone to stand off who can see the bigger picture, who can see the pinch points and troubleshoot the pinch points as well. But absolutely. And just as you're advocating, which is actually the real power in training is in simulation. So the didactic kind of sitting down, listening to people, there's still space for covering, I think, the basics and fundamentals off in that way. But the real leverage and the real power of education is in simulation workshops and that kind of plenary group discussion where there's more interaction and there's more interaction with the information. So it brings it into real terms, real life, and it actually makes much more difference on the ground, because people remember it a lot more when they're actually physically doing it. And they're in a dynamic situation. And my revelation is that you have to incorporate simulation into all training, because if you don't, head knowledge doesn't necessarily transpire to being physical knowledge. It can stay in the head and or be forgotten quite easily if you're just listening to it. But if you're doing it, it really compounds that learning. So would you, when you were teaching, Julian, would you debrief people afterwards? Would you provide feedback to them in a structured way, or would you how would you compound the learning if they weren't doing what you wanted them to do?
If it's the first time, I change them over, and what I find is the humour helps, because a few of the courses I did, the instructors would go, "Oh my God, what are you doing, Woodall? You trying to put the cricoid tube upside down, you lunatic!" And I, right, sorry, staff, well done, son. And you didn't mind that. It was like, yeah, okay, I screwed up. But when you got someone bearing down on you, some people can get a bit scared about it, and they're like, uh, 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 uh. So what I do, when I run exercises, I let them crack on, and then what I do, then I debrief them. I say, okay, why did you do that? Okay, so did you think about doing that? What about if you did that? Then that would have led on to doing it. Oh, right, okay. No, so remember, you do it in such a way that they're not, what you don't want is people scared of doing first aid and any remote areas work, because they feel then if you go in at them, what are you doing? What are you doing? That's so wrong. They're going to lose all confidence. They're not going to enjoy it, and learning's got to be fun. Mm. And so the training I do, I make fun, where I throw in a few jokes. Some people don't like them, but hey, that's me. I'm the instructor. I'm in charge. But if you make it fun, they remember that. They remember that from the actual training. So if you have a laugh and a joke with them when they've cocked up, afterwards, if they do it in a real situation, I know that they'll think, well, I won't do that because I did that on Julian's course, and so the proof is there as well, that I've had clients email me say, mate, never guess what, I treated a casualty and I was just about to make a mistake, and I thought no, and someone actually said, what would Julian do? And that is great. And it's how you've got to be, so you've got to put the training over to the group who you're doing it to, but in a way that it's fun, interactive, it's entertaining, but it's educational. Yeah. So that when they go out into, whether it's first aid in an office or a construction site, where they're tree surgeons, where they're working at a wind farm, they are basically confident that they can put those skills in. And in Ethiopia, we found that each person was confident doing it. That we took a step, we asked them, we had to say, how are you going to do this? Well, I'm going to do this. And then what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to do that. Okay, off you go. Okay, because if not, it was chaos. The first course, we just, like in England, we just step back and they go in and they do stuff. It didn't work like that in Ethiopia. It was like, oh my God, what they, hang on, where's he going and all that sort of stuff. So we worked out the next course. One person came up, there's your casualty. How are you going to treat them? I'm going to do this. Okay. Have you got the equipment? Where's the first aid? Where's the actual trauma bag? It's in the glove compartments for Julian. Excellent. Right. Good. Off you go. Here's your casualty. What have they got? Sucking chest wound. How are you going to do that? So it was all about adapting again.
Yeah, indeed. Adapt to the situation, which entirely makes sense. Julian, just coming into land slightly, when you're teaching out in these remote environments, I heard you teaching before about standing back and leadership skills as well. What are some of the
Yeah.
fundamentals of leadership that you teach in these situations, especially when there might be 2, 3, 4 casualties? What do you advocate when you're teaching these kind of leadership skills?
I teach them improvise, adapt, overcome, honesty, integrity, confidence, assertiveness. I say you can't afford to actually dither. You can't go, because I said that's going to put the actual casualty off. You've got to go in there. And I always say, I'm honest, I say, your heart is going to be giving it that. But you've got to be calm and collected. You've got to look like and act like a leader, because that then is going to calm down your casualty, because your casualty is going to think that this person knows what they're doing. You can't afford to you will drop stuff. I remember I patched up a guy in the Omani desert. He had an open the fracture, and I put on a bolster bandage, either 2 bandages either side, another bandage, and the doctor was talking to me. And then it was 2:30 in the morning. I walked around to the other side of the doctor. I tripped up over the casualty's broken leg. Who echoed the words "Woodall, you P word," and it echoed down all of the actual desert. I went, shh, put on a tactical exercise, shh. But I bring these things in because it's important for the actual delegates on the actual course to know, well, this guy's actually is a human as well. He makes mistakes. But when you're approaching the casualty, I always say, check for danger, 10 seconds, look at your wound, work out how you're going to treat it, talk to your casualty, and if they can move, get them to stem the actual bleeding or whatever it is, and start asking them what's wrong, how do you feel? Yeah, where's the actual pain? Are you on any medication? Start getting a patient history as you're getting your gloves on, opening on that pack, getting all of the stuff out. Then you can start obviously designating people. Sometimes you might not have a team. It's just you.
Yeah. And you can't afford to stand back. You have to come in, stand back, come in, stand back, come in.
You've got to be the team leader, right? Do you know how? Right, and if you don't know those people, you're like that then, right? Does anyone know any first aid? I do. I did it once on a rugby pitch for a kid who had a neck injury, and all of the adults were useless. And there's this 8-year-old. I know he was about 10. This kid was. So, have you got any first aid experience? He said, I'm a scout. I've done a first aid course. Right, you're my assistant now. Because the adults were basically, some of them were they just stood around. And one of the things also we teach is never be scared about treating a casualty. Because in this country, there's a lot of the I could get sued bit. And you're just like, no, unless you go above your remit, you're not going to get sued. And if you're in that African bush, they're not going to sue you.
Yeah. But you're right. You said something key there, which is, stay within your remit, stay within your competence, stay within areas of your skill domain, as you said there, which is absolutely key. But yeah, I really agree with you, Julian, in regards to everything you were saying there. And I know your non-technical skills as you're teaching have to be so much better. The incremental pressure which builds almost mandates more of a non-technical approach as well. And so from a sequential point of view, I think sometimes listening and learning to discern the priority in the scene is almost the fundamental prerequisite to where you start with the scene. So standing back, almost putting your hands behind your back and just listening for who's not making noises. Because if it is multifactorial and there's multiple patients, who is self-selecting as far as who's screaming, who's not? Because a dynamic triage situation is more so around who might not be making noise. And also, yeah, you know, as you were notioning to earlier, not necessarily running to patients without remembering the safety piece, especially in a sort of dynamic road traffic collision or blast or ballistic situation. You know, one of the major attributes is from the hierarchy of safety is your own safety, and
Yeah.
actually not getting sort of blind to the fact that there is clinical need in front of you, but that you need to be operating in a safe place yourself. And certainly in some of these remote environments, that's probably a priority as well, I'm sure.
I mean, the good thing, all of this equipment now, like a tourniquet, Celox, Israeli bandages, a Fox, a chest seal, they're all self-aid equipment. It's all self-aid. If the casualty can drag itself out and actually get into actual cover behind an engine, obviously block, a tree or something, or a ditch, and actually treat themselves, they are sorted. But it's better to take a deep breath, slow down, all that sort of stuff. You know, and that I emphasised that on the actual course. I said, if you're driving along and there's the two of you and your passenger's hit, the driver can't do it. You can't obviously pull over. You've got to get the bandage on yourself. You might have to, injured, make that obviously phone call as well. As I said, it's going to be a hard thing, but it's got to be done. It has to be. So it's all different sort of. You've got to approach each country, each person, each environment, and each wound in a different way. Because you can't think, well, that worked on that one. The stuff I did in the actual desert might not work in Africa. One of the things I teach is a neck injury. I say, okay, if you've been shot here, how are you going to put on the bandage? And the first thing they do is they say, oh, I'll stick it around here. And then I go, you've achieved 50% of your aim. The 50% is that you've basically stopped the actual bleed. The other 50% of you've actually strangled your casualty. But as soon as you teach them, you put the pad here, and then you go under the armpit. So you get them to put the hand on the head, you go under the armpit, and then you put the hand down, and the tension stops the bleed. They're like, oh, wow, okay. And one of the things I taught in Africa was, I'd say, unless your casualty has got a neck like a giraffe, get the bandage and you fold it over, and the pad acts as more of an absorbent. So it's all about, especially out in Africa and out in Arabia, you've got to know your audience, and how you can teach here in England, you can't teach out there. You've got to really slow down, and your first course is your test.
Almost your baseline or your benchmark.
It's like, right, I can't say that because that's a colloquialism. I can't do that. I'm talking too fast. I need to slow down. Every time I used to say, now, if you don't understand me, you must say, Julian, slow down a bit. Another thing I found was I learned a bit of words in Amharic. And that impresses the audience because it shows that you've learnt their language. So, like I was saying, a gudat ras, injured head. They'll go, he learns Amharic. It's not like a big I am. That's actually showing you that you're culturally aware. And it's easy for them. And I did have a notebook, and I can't find it anywhere, but I did have my Amharic phrase book where I have to say, what does that mean? And, how do I pronounce that? So it's all out there. I mean, it was great. It was a great sort of. We had one person who had a spider's bite, so we just put some antihistamine cream on them, and that was it. Some person had a cut finger. I know I had food poisoning the first 3 trips, and it's not because the food out there is spicy.
Mm. I can imagine actually,
And
Julian.
it's not a very good thing. Luckily, I had a second instructor. So this one Wednesday, I remember it was Wednesday. I was like, going, now I'm going to hand you over to Jim. Jim, I will back.
Oh gosh. Julian, so just coming into land slightly on the conversation, I just wanted to ask if you've got any message for the WEM community really at this time. I know it's quite a difficult time in life. We're in the middle of a pandemic. It's quite a unique time, really, quite a unique juncture in life. This might be the only pandemic we actually indeed live through. But to those listening and or watching, have you got a message to the wider community, just from your background or from things you've learned or would like to say?
Yeah, we have to think of positive and never think negative, because it will end. It will end. The doctors, the scientists, do everything that they can to get us through all this. A lot of people have lost the businesses. I know all my training courses have stopped, but I'm thinking new ways of handing over information. I'm looking at a YouTube channel, how to stick on a tourniquet and a bandage, all that sort of stuff. So if you're an business and you're a doctor, if you're in rotos like medic, if you're in any obviously part of the world, have a look at how you can pass over your skills to an audience where you normally you go on courses, interact with them. You can't do that now, but you have to think obviously positive. You have to think, how can I get through this? How can I hand over my obviously a lot of medical skills still by keeping going? And you've got to think obviously positive about this. Isolation. I stayed over to a mate. Said, "My God, it's like my first tour in Northern Ireland in the South Armagh. You go to the shop, you get food, you come back, you do exercise, you're stuck indoors." But I've started to do online courses. I'm on my second day of doing a course with the WHO on obviously COVID-19 to learn actually more about it. Then I'm sticking a bit of stuff onto my like Medical Service International Facebook page to put out there. So you have to keep active. You have to keep positive. Forget negativity stuff. We will get through this. There's people working the flat out, and Doctor Who courses. There's some great free courses on there. If you're a doctor at the moment, obviously staring at me, I do apologise, docs, if I'm teaching you how to actually suck eggs. But this is from obviously like my point of view is you've got to think obviously positive. You've got to stay obviously safe. You've got to stop indoors and that. But look at ways of getting the word out there. One of the things I'm doing at the moment, I've now, one of my clients who's a tree surgeon said, "Do you know of any courses on a line for kids?" And I said, apart from the good old the Vinnie Jones one, can't think of anything else. And then all of a sudden I had a flush of inspiration. So I've now got a character called Sherlock Bear, medical detective. And what Sherlock Bear does, he teaches mums and dads how to teach their kids first aid.
Fantastic.
So it's a trying obviously time. It's a sad obviously time with all of the losses of life and that. But we can actually learn from all this. It's happened. It's no good saying, well, if we've done this, if the actual lockdown would have come sooner, if the government had done this, if the World Health Organization would have done that. You can't think like that. It happened. In the military, I've been in situations where we're supposed to go in, we're supposed to do that, and all of a sudden it goes to pot, and you have to replan straight away. We weren't. A big example is 9/11. We were not prepared for actual 9/11. Now in the world now of healthcare and medicine, we were not prepared for COVID-19. But we've just got to get on. We've got to think obviously positive and get obviously through it.
Fantastic, Julian.
Oh, that makes sense.
It does. It absolutely does. It absolutely does. And take the lessons learned from it. Absolutely. Julian, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. I know I'm mindful we've been going on for about an hour. I could talk to you for a lot longer. But listen, thank you so much for your perspectives and your thoughts today, Julian. And just to finish, if people want to find you, where can they find you, Julian?
Right then, I can be found at Medic Services International. We have a Facebook page, lots of interesting stuff on there. I've got an Instagram account as well, and that's Medic Services International, and we put stuff on about our courses. We also start to put stuff on about health and fitness, because at the moment, a lot of people's obviously mental health is obviously going to be suffering from stopping in. So we put on tips of like, I do think, or like the woodland fitness. There's been tips on calling an emergency in a remote area and all that sort of stuff. So there's good things on there. So big thank you to all the NHS. You're doing a fantastic job this moment. Thank you so much. You're actually keeping us safe.
Definitely. I wholeheartedly agree with you, Julian. Listen, it's been a pleasure today talking to you, and you stay safe. And
Owen, thank you, and you.